Start spreading the news. I'm sorry. The UFC has arrived in New York City. Welcome to Inside The Octagon. I'm John Gooden, and with me once again is Dan Hardy. With the biggest event in the history of the promotion on November 12th, UFC 205 has got quality matchups all the way down the card. So, on this edition, we delve deep into the prelims and pick apart three of the finest. Frankie Edgar and Jeremy Stephens will slug it out at featherweight. And with Edgar's vast experience going against Stephens' raw power, it could be a blink and you'll miss it contest. Dagestan's finest fighting export, Khabib Nurmagomedov, is many people's lightweight champion in waiting. But can he get past the test of Michael Johnson, who is tearing his way up the rankings? Let's move straight in to the lightweight division now. This is a fantastic matchup in the lightweight division. Khabib was a little upset that he didn't get his title shot, but what a great opportunity for Michael Johnson to keep the wheels turning and get himself right back in that conversation for title contention. Underneath the guidance of the many great heads at Black Zillions, really active fighter, very athletic. Always enjoy watching his fights.
Yeah, and a great opportunity. Like you said, this is another one of those situations like Raquel Pennington, Miesha Tate, getting a chance to jump up and fight the #1 contender immediately. You know, there was a point where we were talking about Michael Johnson as a contender for the title on a 4-fight win streak, especially with the win over Gleison Tibau. But then he fell off. He had a couple of losses to Dariush, which was controversial, and then a frustrating loss to Nate Diaz, where he kind of got drawn into a fight that he didn't want. He stopped utilising the low kicks and got away from his game plan a little bit. He's going to have to be disciplined against Khabib. Khabib's going to come forward, he's going to push the pace, he's going to try and close the distance, out-wrestle him, make it gritty, and the reach advantage for Michael Johnson as well. A 9-inch reach advantage has got to be something that Khabib's got to work around. And with the speed that Michael Johnson's got as well, it's a big factor. Now, one other thing I want to mention before we move on to the playlists is the experience between the two. Yes, Khabib is unbeaten in 23 fights, but Michael Johnson's had 28 fights.
Right.
You know, he has more experience. He's had 10 losses on his record, but there are lessons to be learned from all of those losses. And Khabib fights like a man who's confident because he's never been punished.
He's reckless.
He's reckless, yeah, which is exciting and effective, obviously.
Well, it must be, yeah.
But he needs to overcome a guy like Michael Johnson, especially having a couple of years out. You know, his last win was against RDA, which was over 2 years ago now. Right. He's fought once since, and it was against an unranked late replacement. He needs a big win over a top 10 guy in order to make the argument for a title shot, and this is his opportunity. So
Nurmagomedov, an AKA fighter, they have produced champions. A great, strong mindset. He's got a whole nation behind him back in Russia that are willing him on. He needs this.
Yeah.
What have we got?
Well, basically, the quintessential Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting style. Crowding, aggressive, gritty, very, very powerful. I mean, he's a big, strong athlete for this weight class, and a lot of people, when they see him out of training camp, are always surprised at the size of the guy. You know, if he can utilise this weight and this strength, he can take away a lot of that athletic ability from Michael Johnson, who really needs to be fresh to be able to fire as quickly as he does. If Khabib can make the fight uncomfortable for at least the first round, he has a possibility of dragging Michael Johnson away from his game plan, like Nate Diaz did, and force him to make mistakes which Khabib can capitalise on. But the reach advantage here is the key, because if Michael Johnson can maintain that distance, that's going to make it very difficult for Khabib to get in. And he's got decent wrestling, he's got decent takedown defence. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Khabib's going to put him on the floor and beat him up. Michael Johnson has a lot to offer in this fight. And he's been active, he's been busy, and he's come off a great win over Dustin Poirier as well, which also proves he has that one-shot fight-changing power, which could be very useful here.
OK, well, let's take a look at him.
I'm a big fan of Michael Johnson. I like his attitude, I like his confidence, and I was disappointed when I saw him kind of fall off when we were talking about him in title contention. But I think that he really showed what he's capable of in this fight, where a lot of people picked Poirier to win. I was actually working the Fox desk with Cormier for this one, and we both thought Poirier was going to take this. So for Michael Johnson to have got that great win over Poirier, who was on a streak at lightweight since moving up from feather, was a massive statement for him. And there's a real chip on Michael Johnson's shoulder about his position in the division, the respect that he gets from the other fighters, the opportunities that he's been given by the UFC. He feels like he's fighting against the tide, against the current. And this is really a turning point. He has the #1 contender in front of him now. There's nothing to complain about. If he beats him, there's an argument for a title shot straight away. So whether he can continue to keep that chip on his shoulder and fight with that attitude, we won't know until he gets in there. Also, Khabib has this aura about him that really overwhelms a lot of people before the fight starts.
Do you think that Khabib's explosiveness, because he does everything in bursts at 100%, can he maintain that if indeed this fight goes quite deep against a fantastic athlete who's very mobile like Johnson?
I think it depends on how the fight's contested. If Khabib fights in the ways that are comfortable for him, if he can make it an uncomfortable, gritty, grappling style where he's constantly dragging him down to the mat and beating him up and out-positioning him on the floor, then yes, he can maintain that. If he's forced into a boxing match with Michael Johnson and he's uncomfortable, that's going to raise his heart rate and that's going to change his cardiac output.
Okay.
So really it's about if he can dictate the fight, he can maintain over the distance. If not, and if he's forced into uncomfortable situations, that's where Michael Johnson can come in and steal it. And that's also when he's going to start to panic and make mistakes. OK, so we could possibly be seeing the future lightweight champion out of those. Maybe. Most definitely. One of these two guys is definitely a shoo-in for a title shot in the next year, for sure. And this fight is pivotal in that title shot. OK, well, let's move it on to the featherweight division. And an old favourite of both of ours in Frankie Edgar. And, of course, you know, Jeremy Stephens. Enjoyed watching his fights. So explosive, devastating power. He's just been the guy who has led the lighter weight classes. He's a very charismatic fighter, a very honest worker as well. Most definitely. And usually I would say, yes, height reach advantage for Jeremy Stephens. But Frankie Edgar's fought at lightweight. He's fought bigger guys. He's dealt with bigger guys. He knows how to negotiate these different body types. Right. Now, Stephens is powerful and he's aggressive, somewhat reckless. He does leave himself exposed for it at times, and this is where the good footwork of Frankie Edgar comes into play, be able to cut angles and punish him when he misses. If he doesn't miss, though, that's when Jeremy Stephens comes into his own, because like Eddie Alvarez, he lands one shot, he sees you hurt, and then he just starts pouring the pressure on. And we know Frankie's tough. We've seen him come through, you know, hellish first rounds against Gray Maynard a couple of times. But we don't want to have to see him constantly do that. You know, he had a bad outing against Aldo in his last fight. He'll be disappointed because he was so close to the belt, you know. What that does to his motivation moving into this one is a big question, and how he deals with someone who's a big, strong, aggressive fighter who feels confident that he's going to step in and really spoil this show for Frankie. It's an exciting one, and also the experience is really a wash. I mean, I think Frankie's 19-5, and Stephens is 25-12 or something like that. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, as well as fighting bigger guys. You know, I mean, he comes down from a very high weight to make. Well, he used to make lightweight, and now he does to make feather. So, he's a hell of a unit for this weight class. Let's put it that way. OK, well, let's turn our attention to Frankie Edgar, fighting at home. Fighting under the tutelage of Mark Henry, who has created the UFC lightweight champion. A lot of good, positive energy coming out of that corner. Let's take a look at what else he has when he steps inside the octagon. Well, I'm always appreciative of Frankie Edgar. I always learn so much from him. You know, these tricky little things that he employs in his game. One of my favourite takedowns in the UFC against Cub Swanson, where he just uses that little short shot to lift him off his hands. And then again with Gray Maynard, we've seen his punching power. His statement that he made against Chad Mendes was huge as well. You know, there are certain times when you look at Frankie Edgar and you think he can beat anybody in the world. You know, there's nobody in these lighter weight classes that can do all of the things that Frankie Edgar does as well as he does, and put them together so seamlessly. You know, this is why Frankie Edgar is such a special fighter, because he's able to employ his wrestling game and his excellent grappling as well as his fantastic boxing and footwork, and puts it all together in a way that it's very difficult to find ways into his game. Much like Demetrius Johnson, it's difficult to find ways into his game. You know, you have to punish him with a couple of big shots just to start opening him up, and even that doesn't work. So whether Jeremy Stephens can hit him with a good clean shot and then keep that pressure on him is a question. No doubt he can catch him with a good shot, because Jeremy Stephens gives 100% when he throws. And if you give that kind of intention into a punch, generally you're going to land a couple. But Frankie Edgar can maintain and can control the distance and use his angles and his footwork to constantly change the direction and keep Jeremy Stephens a step or two behind. This is about Jeremy Stephens showing that he's adaptable and he's dynamic and he's not that bullish, go forward and trade kind of fighter. We need to see other developments in his game if he's ever going to be the lightweight world champion, because it is the busiest division in the UFC. OK,
well, remind us about Mr. Stephens.
OK. Again, another fun fighter, really exciting to watch. Just clubs people. It's like he's carrying kettlebells in his hands when he throws punches. There's so much weight to them. Even Cub Swanson was surprised when he caught him, and not even catching him with clean shots that would knock him out. But look at this beautiful armbar defence here against Oliveira as well.
Yeah.
You know, this just shows his tenacity and his explosiveness. And let's just have a quick look at that, because we talk about fighters' explosiveness and we always think about that moving forward. We don't often think about how explosiveness plays into other elements of the game as well. Like, this is on the spot, right? Watch how he jumps up here and catches Bermudez under the chin. Beautiful. I mean, and that's using that explosiveness that he would normally use moving forward,
just straight
to generate power going up as well. It works perfectly here. Catches Bermudez under the chin and drops him right to the canvas. You know, he's an explosive fighter that can use that controlled explosion to utilise, you know, in several different ranges. Backed up against the fence here, if he finds himself in a situation where he's cornered against Frankie Edgar, it still makes him very dangerous. You know, Frankie Edgar's got to get that level change. If there's a threat of a knee there at the same time, that could make him question that, which could potentially remove a part of his game plan.
Yeah. So don't worry about circling off to the side.
No.
Just jump straight up, throw a knee out and see how effective it is.
He could have probably jumped over Bermudez in that situation.
Yeah. Very nice. There's so much more on offer at UFC 205. We're going to take a quick look at this now, all the way through. So, I mean, it's just, some of these are main events.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or a lot of these are main events.
They are. I mean, seeing Khabib on the undercard is crazy. We would never even think that. And seeing Frankie Edgar, I mean, headlining the undercard, normally would be headlining his own event. It just shows how stacked this card is to have 3 title fights on the main card, as well as all those prelims. It's a gift from the UFC.
It's a gift from the MMA gods and the UFC.
It is.
Nice, lovely stuff. Well, that wraps up our analysis of UFC 205. Remember, we have 4 other shows out there, so make sure to check those out before the first bell rings on November 12th. As always, you can get involved in the conversation in the comment section below and on Twitter using the hashtag Inside The Octagon. So, Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous fighting arena, will finally play host to arguably its biggest ever event. The dream of MMA fans worldwide will be realised as finally the UFC takes over New York City. It's goodbye from us.
Welcome to the Empire State. Stand up. I'm a BK brother. My own Madison Square, catch me at the fight.
Conor McGregor!
Sensational. From New York City, right, Cam?
You're damn right.
Big shot!